God has been opening doors for this to make Christian education accessible. And I'm just a firm believer that one of God's avenues, tools for discipleship in his kingdom is going to come through Christian education.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Thought Elite Podcast, the Christian Leaders Podcast, powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and learn how you can save actual tax dollars and energy credits. Again, go to ebebsolutions.com today to free up more of your capital. Tell them Tony sent you. Friends, today on the podcast, I'm so excited for you to meet Scott Smith. Scott has become a dear friend of mine, and he is the superintendent of schools at Troy Christian Schools. In our conversation today, we talk about what's happening in Christian education and how wild of a time it is. We talk about what it means to take over for the founder and when you are forced to lead, when you're not necessarily ready. Such a good dialogue from Scott. You're going to love his heart. And I know that we have a lot to learn from the conversation that we have today. So now here's a quick word from our partners and my conversation with Scott Smith. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have my dear friend, Superintendent of Troy Christian Schools, Scott Smith. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tony. Glad to be here.
You know, as you know, one of the things we're wrestling with this year is the 12 most Googled leadership questions. And this month's question is all about trust and culture. It's really appropriate given your story and some of the things that you've been into that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But when you think about leadership and stepping in to lead a team, maybe if you have to step in unexpectedly and you have to begin to build that muscle of trust and culture, what are some of the first things that you think are important in building trust on a team?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just faithful presence. You know, just the being a person who keeps showing up and a person who listens to people in that process. I know when I first stepped into leadership. Into leadership over people who were even older than me. So my first kind of big leadership piece in that regard was being principal at the school. And I remembered kind of my first thought was I graduated from Troy Christian. And so some of the people that I'm going to be leading were my teachers when I was a high school student. And so they had a different perspective of me, you know, and here I am, man, you know, I'm 20 years younger than them. And I had to step into this, but I think what the piece that was, the most helpful in earning that trust and building that trust is, just being a person who, kept showing up and would keep listening to people. And, I remember probably one of the faults that I had early on as a leader was I'm stepping into leadership as a principal, and I was looking at the previous leadership like, oh, I would do this differently and I would do that differently. And then I got into the seat and I realized, oh, there's a whole world of information that I was not aware of that impacted the decision making that they were having, and that the lack of that made me more critical of some of the decision making. And so stepping into that and realizing it gave me a humility in the position that I'm carrying now into this new role, right? Like I've learned that. But the biggest thing is not trying to be the person who has all of the answers and everything figured out, but a person who's asking really good questions and listening to that. And when people feel heard, and you follow up with it, they're more likely to trust, you know, as you're moving forward, trust the decision-making process that you're going through as well. Yeah.
I love what you talked about, faithful presence. I think one of the interesting things about that is in the school world and in the business world, everything happens kind of seasonally.
Yeah.
And so there are seasons where you spin up and there are seasons where it feels a little slower. How do you build faithful presence when it's like, I'm going Mach 10 with my hair on fire, and like there's all these things that need to happen, and oh, by the way, you're new and 20 years younger, and so what's an example of faithful presence like when it feels like you don't have time to just be present? We got to do something, Scott. Like all these type A leaders are like, we got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the challenge, right? Is being available and yet getting work done. That is the challenge. But I think the key to that has been I'm okay with interruptions.
Mm,
When I look at the way Jesus led through his ministry, much of what you see is him just responding to the interruptions of he's going somewhere and somebody stops him in the middle of that and he's addressing it. And I think it's easy for leaders to see the interruptions as distractions to the work or interruptions as something that's sidetracking you. And a lot of times, because your ability to function as an organization rides on the people that you have in that organization, if they're not supported, they're not going to function well. And if they're not functioning well, your organization's not going to function well.
mm.
Right. So I think just being okay with the interruptions, one of my favorite things, the people you work with know you're busy, right? Like they see you kind of going from meeting to meeting. They know that. And one of my favorite things is somebody will come to me and say, "Hey, I know you're really busy, but can I run this by you?" And my response is, "That's why I'm here." You know what I mean? That's part of the job. And so to watch them hear that, and then just kind of settle into like, oh, okay, he is present with me, and he's going to be able to hear what I'm saying, is the key. So it's a viewpoint on distraction, or interruptions as distractions from the work, versus seeing it as, no, this is the work, because I need to support the people who are running the day to day and what we're doing. It's still a challenge because there are days where it's like, that's all it is. And then I have my pile of work on the backside that I still have to figure out. So one of the things just on a practical level is I on my door to my office, if it's open, I'm saying you can come in. If it's not open, they know, hey, this is a time Scott's focused or maybe in a meeting. And that's kind of just an easy signal without me having to, to say something like, hey, I'm busy right now. I know I just need to shut the door if I need uninterrupted time.
Focus time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's interesting, principal, and now you play the role of superintendent. And so I think we need to give people kind of a little bit of scope. And so can you kind of give everyone kind of what you oversee in terms of the vastness that is Troy Christian?
So I just finished my second year, so I'm still figuring that out. Right. I think one of the things that coming out of the principalship, one of the things mantras I have is I don't know what I don't know, and that's part of the process of learning that. And so that's kind of where I'm at. What's interesting about education, especially Christian education, is the school is an educational institution. So obviously we're a school. So there's a whole side of understanding academics, understanding expectations with the Ohio Department of Education that I need to stay up on, which are constantly changing. Sure. And so there's that whole side of it. It is a business. And so I'm, managing a budget that with the scale that I had not seen previously. So those first few weeks of signing checks were kind of shell-shocking, if you will. But you settle into it. So there's the business side of things, just operating a business. But then there's also the ministry side of things. So there's kind of these three pieces of that where as a Christian school, like we don't want to be a Christian school just to name. Like we want to represent and honor Jesus the best we can. We're not perfect at it. We're human, but there's kind of as superintendent, I am the person for vision casting, for the spiritual climate and direction of the school. I'm ultimately the person where the buck stops in terms of the academics and educational piece to that. I've got a lot of people that I have to rely on and trust to do their work in that, but ultimately I'm held responsible for that whole piece. And then the finance, the business side of things, I'm the guy, to make sure that things are working.
So how many students are we talking about in all of the ecosystem, including daycare?
Yeah, so we have just over 800.
800. And then how many employees?
We have about 160.
And annual budget kind of ish?
It's just over 9 million, not including gifts and donations.
Yeah.
We really try to function without including those, and those are just cherries on top. Yep.
Yeah, which they would gladly accept if you feel called.
Yes,
Right?
100%. Yes, yes. I'll give you addresses to drop that off. Yeah,
Right.
tax deductible.
I just say all that because I think a lot of leaders, when they hear something like faithful presence, they think, oh, you can build trust and culture just through faithful presence on a small scale. But what you're really talking about is a big scale. And so,
Yeah.
how do you get the idea of faithful presence or the culture that you're trying to build to trickle down to all of those employees and all of those students? I mean, your motto is the heart of education is the education of the heart,
That's right.
and that's actually something that you believe in practice.
Hmm.
How do you get all the steps underneath you to practice it as well?
It's communication, right? It's expectation. When we hire someone, kind of the steps that we walk through, I say there's 5 things for us that are critical if you're going to work here and be a part of our organization. The first one is that you love God, you love Jesus. If you don't, there's plenty of places to work that are going to be great, but this is who we are. And the second is that you love people, and the way that that looks for everybody. And I don't care if it's you're a teacher, administrator, bus driver, custodian, is that you are loving people by just being present with them, asking them how you are. The it's not that like, oh, we're okay with people sharing their testimony or okay with people praying over somebody else. It's no, that's the expectation. So
Mm,
right from day one, we're trying to communicate that if you're here, this is a ministry, and what ministry looks like is loving people practically, by just being available, by praying, by being willing to pray, by being willing to show up, at like for students. Sometimes the easiest thing is you showed up at their game, and then the next day you said, "Hey, great job," or I saw you riding the bench. Whatever that whatever that
right,
may be.
right, right.
But it's just simply that, just being available to that. The hard part with that is you work with people, right? So there's always going to be conflicts and tensions that arise. And so we really try to work that out following Matthew 18 principle, right? That we want people to resolve those things one-on-one, where you have those tensions. And then from there, the community is supportive in trying to find resolutions to things that come up as well. So it really is setting the expectation from day one. It's not even really day one. It's in the interview process, that this is the expectation that we have of people who are going to come and work here. So like teachers, for instance, junior high and high school, we do a missions week. So our junior high and high school are going all over the world for an entire week right before spring break. And it's the expectation that our teachers are leading those and are a part of those. And that's where you build relationships. And it's not oh, if this is something you want to do. No, this is who we are. And so what you're signing up for to work here is to be a part of those kinds of things as well.
How do you know when someone's not a culture fit? And then what do you do? I think this is especially hard for Christians because I think oftentimes we confuse Christianity with being soft, and that's not been my experience. But I think sometimes it's like, oh, well, we got to have a little grace. How do you know when there's too much grace? How do you know when it's time to release someone for their next God calling, as I've heard it
Yeah.
mentioned in the past, and other institutions? How do you walk that line?
Mm. That is probably the hardest line to walk as a leader, especially. Part of it is as a leader, part of it's how you're wired, right? I'm wired to want to see the best in people always. And so I tend to lean a lot more on the grace side of things. One of the things that we're working on that we've just not had in place until really coming into this school year is just developing clarity with performance. So we're starting to institute performance improvement plans. And part of what I've been talking with our administrative team is when we're laying something out for a plan, we do this with students, right? So if if we're having behavioral issues and it's repeated, what we'll do is sometimes it gets to the point where we'll put them on a contract to say like, hey, here's the things that we want to see changed. And here's the things that we're willing to do to come alongside of you to help you with that. But ultimately, if we don't see improvement, we don't see growth in this, we're going to be evaluating whether you return back as a student. And I said, so that's something we've instituted, these contracts. We're now starting to look at that as this is how we do it with staff, right?
Mm,
But what we're trying to communicate with that, and this is where you can still err on the grace. You don't have to come across as as hard-nosed or uncaring, is we see the strengths that you have. We see how you can fit in this. Here's the things that have to be improved in order to continue on here. But here's what we're going to do to come alongside of you. So whether that's we're going to pair you with a mentor teacher who's really good at the area that you're struggling in, and let's see what that can do to sharpen you in that particular area. Here's the supports that we can do. So we don't want to just say, hey, it's all on you to figure this out. We want to say, hey, here's the things that we want to see growth in. Here's the things we think can help with that. If you're willing to come alongside and walk that path with us, then we'll continue to walk with you as long as you are working at that and making improvement and kind of working through it. So I think the clarity piece, communication piece is key, but it is um, I, I think a lot of times, sometimes somebody's just not a good fit culturally, right? That can be a personality thing. That can be a values piece. And I think that's the question with that really is this a skill set lacking? Is the person just in the wrong spot? Or are what they're valuing different than what your organization values? And I think those are the questions you've got to wrestle with. If it's a values thing, you got to cut ties. You got to let them go to a place that is maybe more in line with where they're at. But if it's anything else, do the work to try to get them in the right spot or to fill in the skills gap.
I've had the opportunity to walk alongside you a bit in this recent season, and
Mm-hmm.
I know that you didn't necessarily intend on becoming the superintendent when you did. That was a part of a much bigger story. I'm wondering if you can kind of bring everyone
Sure.
into how you ended up in that seat.
Yeah. So the former superintendent was actually my father-in-law, and he was also the founder of the school. So he started the school before I was alive. So it was 1980 they founded the school, and so he, as a founder, grew the school from like 30 students to over 700 students, and
Mm.
an incredible man of God, just somebody who like you point to as this is a person who steps out in faith and God honors, right? I came on actually I thought my calling in life, felt God calling me into ministry early on, just fresh out of high school and through a series of events that became very clear. But I thought that was going to be church ministry. And then it was my junior year in college where a job opening came up to teach Bible at the school. And that's, I turned it, we kind of stepped away from that because I hadn't finished college yet, right? So I needed to finish that first. But God used that to get me in the mindset of like, well, what would ministry look like in a school? And so the next year it opened up again. I started teaching Bible. I started developing a leadership program for the school, took over the chapel ministry. So I very quickly I think it wasn't that I was trying to climb a ladder at the school. It was, I just saw a need and it was like, hey, we can do this with chapel. I want to step in and be involved. And as a result of that, they just kept giving me more responsibility. As a result of those things, we had a season where we had a principalship opening and they asked me to step into it. Again, education was not my background. It was pastoral studies, theology. But because I had been doing things with the leadership piece, that's where they grew me. After that, I spent a few years with that, and then started doing more staff development. And I was kind of back in this leadership ministry role with the school. And my father-in-law really, as he's approaching retirement, I wouldn't even say retirement, but scaling back. He started being more intentional about bringing me into the midst of decision making and conversations with the school. So I kind of knew. I mean, we were talking through the idea of
Sure.
eventually, this is where he was. Where
You could
he
see the
had
runway, right? Yeah.
absolutely, and the board did. He was very clear with the board. This is who I see as my successor. And so we made that transition actually 2 years ago through kind of a couple years of conversation. So I knew that I was taking over what I didn't know, and this is what was kind of the challenging season that I found myself in. Is we made the transition a couple years ago. The fall after I started, he was diagnosed with rare blood cancer. So he was still working as a business manager for the school, and then he was my support, right? So not having kind of the formalized training of superintendency that some people might have, I had him. And so we were meeting daily, just kind of talking through the nuances of running an organization like this. And then he passed away at the end of that first year of being superintendent for me. And I found myself very quickly like, oh, there's the whole business side of things, which he was still managing. I had to learn very, very quickly.
Mm.
He was bringing me into the loop of those things, but he
Sure.
was managing it, and that's
You
that's
were
a whole
playing with a
different.
safety net, right? Like it was,
Huge, yeah,
which is the
absolutely,
wise way to do it, right? Like
for
it,
sure, for sure. So yeah, I very quickly found myself in kind of a position of like, oh, that was when he passed away. It's my father-in-law, so there's a whole layer of
yeah.
of family there, of grief there. He was a mentor for me for years, but then he was also that safety net. And I think I remember telling my wife and telling some just very close friends of mine that like that day that he passed and the few days after, I just felt the full weight of a big organization fall on my shoulders that I did not feel that entire year before that, because he was still involved. So this past year was the first year of navigating all of the pieces of I don't know what I don't know, and I'm going to have to learn very, very quickly on these things because there's a lot riding on it.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in that kind of space where they're like
For
all of a
sure.
sudden the weight of something shifted and now they're the person, right? Rather
Yeah.
the guy, the gal, or, and they're managing all of that. What are some of the things that as you look back on that you did really well and some things that you're like, that was a disaster, right? Like it was,
Yeah. Oh man, the things I did there. Well, there's some things that I just it really was starting to look at. Okay, we need to set a new foundation because Gary was that foundation for us. So I started looking at policies, procedures, the personnel that we had in different positions, and really started to evaluate. Okay, if we had grown a ton, but we were as an organization still operating kind of like a small organization would, where you have everybody's, a few people are doing everything, and it's just not sustainable for scaling and growth. And then we also had some things that were just kind of more unwritten rules. Like we just understood that this is how you operate here. However, you start bringing in new people, new staff, new students, and those unwritten rules need to be written. They need to be a little bit more spelled out. So one of the things that I think we've done well in this past year has been identifying, but then also starting to make progress towards really clarifying what our new foundation is for how we're going to operate. And that's been really helpful. I have learned to manage a budget well. And so the past 2 years have been successful with that, and that's been encouraging. It's still very stressful, and it keeps me up at night at times. So those two things are kind of the things I would say have been wins. The thing that I have struggled the most with is learning how to pull away,
mm,
learning how to find time where rest is not. I mean, that's just gone by the wayside, and so you just operating out of pure exhaustion a lot of weeks, and when you're in that space, decision making suffers. For me, what that looks like is my decision making gets slower. And that's just simply coming out of I'm dealing with grief. There's a whole family business side of things that we're navigating, plus the school. And I just was not. I knew I needed to get away, just to get my head out of the weeds and to be able to see a little bit more clearly, and just to hear from the Lord in that season. Um, and it just felt like, because of the pressure of everything, it felt like, no, I need to keep my head down and just grind this out, hoping that there would be a season that it would slow down and I could do that. And we know it just doesn't, right? Like there's always something else that's going to come in and steal that time if you're not intentional about Sabbath or rest or pulling away. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is following a founder is never easy. It's
No.
especially never easy when that founder is a mentor, literal father figure in your
Hmm.
life. And oh, by the way, you're married to his daughter,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
it's complicated.
Hmm.
How do you nuance vision and kind of the new direction while still honoring what was?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'm fortunate in that the Gary, the founder, always positioned me in a way of saying he's going to do things not just differently, but better than I did.
Mm.
So I was very fortunate in being set up well for that. Um, I think the hard piece for us is what I'm trying to navigate with vision is historically for us, Gary has been that vision caster, vision creator, and it's come from that standpoint. We're really moving into a season of trying to say like, well, how do we get the perspective of stakeholders, teachers, administration, board members, parents, and having them weigh in on what that vision can look like. And so I think that for us, uh, everybody knows not simply because of Gary's passing, but also because we're in a season of change and growth in education. That it's opened a door for us to kind of craft and create new vision for that. And so I think for me, what I'm trying to look at is I'm both trying to establish a new foundation and uh, set forth a vision that we can pursue while getting input on that. But like I said, I was fortunate in that the founder for me wasn't everybody has honored him, loves him. That was easy. Like there's the legacy he has is the growth of the school's experience and what God has done in that, over the years. For me, it's just it's simply just saying, okay, God, what's next?
Hmm.
What's next? And, I'm not walking into a thing where I'm like, there's a lot that can be next and can be exciting. So I'm not walking into like, oh, this is going to be somehow dishonoring to what's happened before us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What I appreciate about what Gary seemingly did is he anointed you before he
Yes.
needed to,
Yeah.
so that when something unexpected happened, it was an easy transition.
Absolutely.
Now you're a young guy, and we anticipate you being in this role for a long time. How do you, knowing that there's still a very long runway, begin to think about who you're going to anoint, not just in the one seat, but in other seats? Like, how do you know, like, because obviously Gary was calling you up, like he was
Yep.
calling you up from principalship and he was calling you up along the way. How do you do that knowing that, like, hey, you've got a decade, maybe two,
Sure.
3, who knows, right? Like it's
Yeah.
however long the Lord desires in
That's
the
right.
seat, right? Like, but you still need to develop those leaders and make sure that
Mhm.
they're in the ecosystem. What's that look like for you?
Yeah. I'm constantly looking at a couple things, right? Who's just taking initiative on their own for problem solving. W- when I'm looking at our like future direction and where we're heading, I'm looking at people who are willing to take on responsibilities without looking for recognition or compensation. So if somebody's coming to me initially saying, and that's partially because that's what I did, right? Like
Sure,
I
right.
came in and said, hey, if I know that this is just a need for the school, I'm just going to do it because this is what's going to be best. And so when
that's
I
what
see
Gary
people,
did too. Right.
absolutely, for sure.
That's the culture.
That is the culture. That servant heart, right? That like nothing is beneath me. I'm going to jump in and just work towards making this place better without trying to seek some kind of recognition in it is huge. And then I'm looking for capacity, right? Like who has capacity for more responsibility? And the way we've been doing that is kind of, just testing the waters with people. Throw a little bit more responsibility, give them a task or project, see how they do with that. I'm also asking my key administration and key leaders, who are they seeing? Because I don't see everybody, right? I'm only able to view and interact with or see those things to a certain scale. So I'm asking my key administrators constantly, right? Who's coming up that has potential for leadership, has capacity, who's taking things on, who have great ideas. Another one, especially in our like culture, not just at TC, but just the world, where the world's at. You're just seeing more and more people just have a critical heart. And so I'm constantly looking for people who's positive, like who's encouraging, who is like, uh, sees the world. Yeah, it's not that they're naive, right? But they're seeing something as every problem is just another opportunity for growth, and so they're coming at things from a very positive standpoint. And those kind of dynamics are key. So whenever we start to see somebody that's kind of exhibiting some of those things, It is, how do we empower them then? How do we give them responsibilities? How do we give them some opportunities to grow? And that's not to withhold, like, if we can compensate, we will compensate, right? Like, we'll do that. But I kind of want to see that somebody's in it. If somebody's in it just for the compensation piece of it, there's a good chance that it's going to be short-lived, right? Like, compensation levels out for everybody. Like, once you start to get that, it levels out, and then it's you're constantly looking for you know, you're not necessarily looking for uh, the betterment of the organization purely. It's sometimes it comes with just a self, like, this is what I can do to promote myself more, a little bit more. I don't know. I guess it's a little unclear where I'm saying with that, but
Yeah, the mission first kind of mindset, right? The heart
yes,
first, right? Like
absolutely.
it's that leader lag measure. We
Yep.
hope to be able. The lag measure is you took all this initiative and we can compensate you, but the lead measure is I did it without ever
Yeah.
wondering if that was coming or not, right?
Yep.
Like it was like I just believed in it was the right thing to do and I crushed it.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things that I appreciate about you is that even in your leadership, you still keep your pulse on the pastoral part of the
Mm,
work that you do. Your heart really is to make sure that every student, every teacher, every person who's associated with the ecosystem is impacted by Jesus.
hmm
I think a lot of leaders would say that the ROI on that isn't as easy as like, it's just not like that's
Oh
a
yeah,
tough thing to do, right? Because
it
you're
is.
engaged in you're writing the devotions for the staff, you're leading on a spiritual level. Tell me why it's important for you to lead on a spiritual level and the systematic level.
Um, that's my that's that's what I've been called into,
Mm.
right? That is, and from the beginning, when I felt God calling me into ministry. I just thought it looked differently, but it was very clear to me that what God was calling me into was caring for people, caring for souls. This is just the mode that I get to operate within. Um, and it's, for me and for the organization, it is critical, because if I'm not paying attention to that, we will just be another private school. So if we are going to be people who are about heart transformation, if we're going to be about people who are producing students who eventually become adults, who look, who talk, who act, who think, who lead like Jesus, then we have to pay attention to this, and that, as the point leader in the organization, who I would say, not I have a calling to that, but I also have a gifting in that. I'm trying to operate out of my strengths and gifting as a leader, and that's where my gifting tends to be. And so, for me, that is the fulfillment of the mission of the school. And if I'm not leading from that place of caring for where people are at spiritually, then we're going to lose sight of what God has called us to be as a Christian school in His kingdom.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate too is that um, it's one of the ways that you fight burnout is that
Oh, absolutely.
because if you weren't doing it, how would you feel about the job?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
nope.
right.
Yeah, for
No, and
sure.
I just think that there's a lot of leaders out there who are listening, who are going, I have to give up the thing that I love. And I'm
Yeah,
saying, I don't think that you do. I think
yeah,
you may have to scale it back, but
sure.
if you don't stay connected to your why, then the how and the what becomes a lot less important, I think.
That's right. That's right. We just early on, if this is kind of strengths finder, if you're familiar with those
Yeah.
things, right? There's the mentality of, like, you have strengths and weaknesses, and historically, it's kind of been like, well, work on your weaknesses so that your those aren't derailing you. The Strengths Finder organization, that Gallup organization, really presented this idea of no, focus on your strengths, like, pour into your strengths, make them excellent, and manage your weaknesses. And so I think, as a leader, one of the things you got to evaluate is, okay, what am I really, really good at? Where is my ROI in terms of the organization that has value, but also that is also feeding me as a leader? Because if I'm healthy and energized and focused on that, then I'm going to produce the best results. And then I've got to find ways to mitigate or manage those weaknesses, those areas that, like, maybe I'm not great at, but they're part of the function of the job, or I just have to do it. And those are tools and strategies, right? So one of the things is, is if there's something in the organization that gives you energy, that brings you life, that you're just really good at and you're called to, then the other tasks and responsibilities that you have on your plate, you got to find either people or tools to come alongside to those things still have to get done, right? But how do you find ways to provide some margin in your schedule by offloading those to maybe somebody else in the organization or by a tool so that you can create space to do the things that bring you life and bring you energy and bring you passion? Because when you show up exhausted and tired and frustrated and burnt out, everybody in the organization feels that. But if you show up with passion and energy and excited, I think one of the most encouraging things I heard repeatedly, it was one specific person who this past year would see, he's like, how do you deal with all the stuff that you deal with? Because it is all over the place. I mean,
Sure.
like, it's just what you deal with.
It's the Wild West.
It's
right?
a bizarre job. Yeah, it really is.
It
He
really
said, how do
is.
you deal with that and you still show up with a smile on your face? How do you deal with that and you still seem to have joy in your life? And I'm like, man, because I get to do this. I get to have impact, eternal kingdom impact in people's lives every single day. And if I am, my schedule doesn't allow me to interact with, to disciple, to encourage, to mentor, because that is my gifting and calling. If I don't get to do that, I'm going to lose sight of that vision, and then I'm going to show up burnt out, tired, and everybody else is going to feel that, and the organization suffers for that. Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard you talk about is what an interesting time it is for Christian education. I think there are a lot of people who are listening who may not be super familiar with what Christian education is. Obviously, I went to a Christian high school, super thankful for my time there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a big supporter of our public schools. It's not an either or, it's definitely a both and.
Yeah.
Would you talk to us a little bit about if maybe giving us a perspective on Christian education and why it's such an interesting time?
Yeah, it's interesting in that this season of time is, at least in the state of Ohio, but there's several other states who have moved in this direction. There have become more and more resources made available for families to take advantage of. In the state of Ohio, it's the Ed Choice expansion, which literally there's funds available in the state of Ohio for students, families to have scholarship to go. Basically, it's not just Christian education, it's to the school of their choice. But it's allowed families who normally could not afford Christian education, that's been a big hindrance, to be able to take advantage of that. That's one piece. There's another piece of SGOs, it's scholarship granting organizations, that people can now get tax credits, not just deductions, but actual tax credits to donate to these, which provide scholarships for families. So I'll say it this way. My parents paid more, because I went to Troy Christian as a student. My parents paid more for Christian education when I was a student there over 25 years ago than most families would pay now, today, dollar for dollar. It is a wild time. And what I look at is God has been opening doors for this to make Christian education accessible. And I'm just a firm believer that one of God's avenues, tools for discipleship in his kingdom is going to come through Christian education. And you see at the same time that's happening, one of the big things that we hear from families who are coming to us is we're not, hear me on this, we're not trying to we have, especially in our county, we have a lot of really great public schools.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful for our public schools. There's some incredible people who work in these places who are the light of Jesus in those places as well. So 100%. But culture as a whole, and it is definitely being a part of just public education, is moving in ways that aren't in line with most people's faith.
Right.
And students can be lights in those places, but this is some of the most influential times in the life of a kid from 6 years old to 18 years old. And they have a whole life ahead of them to work. If you think about, Jesus didn't start his public ministry until the age of 30, right? Is what we understand. So there's this preparation for a life in the kingdom that has to happen, that Christian education has 6 hours a day. If they're involved in athletics, they have another 2 to 4 hours a day.
Sure.
You've got you've got 10 hours a day to build into the life of a student a foundation of faith, opportunities to see God at work that's ultimately going to set them up for a lifelong pursuit of Jesus and the kingdom of God in this world. I don't. When I look at that, I'm seeing the resources that are opening up for Christian schools to exist and to function well. It's like, man, God is pouring into this mode of discipleship that I think is absolutely fundamentally key for Christian education to get right. We can't mess this up. And so we're called to something that is absolutely incredible. And I think it's going to be a major part of what God does in the world and is already doing in the world.
It's so good. It's so good. I love it. I think it's a unique opportunity, like you said. And you kind of just sense that things are changing a little bit in terms of the culture and all of that stuff. And so, you know, wherever you're listening at, you might want to investigate what opportunities are available for
sure,
for helping cover that gap. My parents paid a significant amount of money for us to go to private schools, and I'm so thankful for it. And I'm also thankful that now there are other opportunities as well.
That's right. I've heard it said, and this is just something that's been ringing in my. It's still an investment, right? That's still, for most people, you're still going to spend at least a couple $1,000s a year for each of your kids to go to a school like that. The question that keeps bouncing around in my head is, what is the faith of the next generation worth, though?
Mm-hmm.
What's it worth?
So good. Okay, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that the bold ones, my community here on the podcast, are going to want to find you all over the interwebs. Where's the best place to learn all things Scott and Troy Christian?
Okay, all things Scott. So Troy Christian's easy. TroyChristianSchools.org. That's the website. You can find all about. We just did a relaunch of our website, but you can find out all about that. We actually have links on the website for the whole Ed Choice stuff and how that whole thing works, which is pretty similar to other states. So if you're not in the state of Ohio, I know there's several other states who are doing something similar to that. But absolutely, TroyChristianSchools.org. I'm not a big social media. I don't have the time for it, to be honest with you. So I'm not a big social media person, but I am on Instagram, Smith J. Scott. And, I must have gotten it early to get my name in there because Scott and Smith are
super rare.
Super yeah. It's kind of hard to find those names available anymore, but yeah.
So good. Okay, the last question we're asking this year is about an introduction. Introduce us to the greatest leader that you've ever met in person, in the flesh. Who is that person and what made him or her so special?
Well, yeah, I've got two people that come to mind. I think Gary's obviously the first one, just because I watched him grow something that didn't exist into something that has had incredible kingdom-lasting impact, and I've been able to sit in his seat now and just be blown away at how did you go through a season where you weren't sure how we were going to pay payroll, and just the trust and faith in God has been incredible. So I couldn't acknowledge a leader with lasting impact without acknowledging him. But the second I would say is I've had the opportunity to be mentored by Tim Elmore. He was the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders out of Atlanta. Has he? Oh, no way. That's awesome. I had an opportunity to be a part of one of his cohorts for a year, and he just is he's such an incredible just person who cares for people. His research on generational studies has been super impactful for me and for what we do at the school. But one of the things that I've just loved about him is, even in the cohort, how he leveraged his circle of people to have influence or to connect people so that they could have impact on their organizations. I went into that cohort and the other people in the cohort were like, senior vice provost of Concordia University with like 6 PhDs. And it's people of that caliber, right? And I'm like, I work at a high school. Like, I don't know why I'm here. You know what I mean? But I just love the way Tim was just very intentional, I think, about bringing people into circles together that seemingly it didn't make sense, but the influence that each would have on each other was profound. And I just love I loved that model of mentoring and discipleship that he had. It had a huge impact on my life. Yeah.
So good. Scott, I deeply appreciate your heart for building the kingdom and your leadership. And what a joy it's been to walk alongside you in this season. And man, I just can't wait to see what God does next. I told you guys, what a great conversation from Scott. I absolutely love the way he talked about leaning in, about saying yes to what God opened up, even when you're not necessarily ready, and about leading from and with grief and following the founder. So many good thoughts here today. The question I have for you, the coaching question for today, is simple but not easy. The question is this: what door is God opening for you in this season? What door is God opening for you in this season? And what's it going to take for you to walk through it? What's it going to take for you to walk through it? As always, friends, forever thankful for you, the bold ones. This show would not be possible without you. Say, hey, do me a favor, let your friends know that you heard a great podcast today. Share it with them. Tell them why they should listen and learn from Scott Smith as well. And until next time, remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.